my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Assembly, a new diapering system for sustainability. Assembly provides everything you need to radically reduce diaper waste, from organic diapers and skincare to upcycled storage bags and specially formulated diaper cleaning detergent. Their complete system, coupled with their 4-step wash instructions, make cloth diapering simple enough for any sleep-deprived parent to master. And just 44 of their reusable diapers is all you'll need from birth to potty training, compared to 6,500 or more diapers if you're using disposables. Assembly's diapers don't just save thousands of diapers from sitting in landfills, they save you thousands of dollars too. Not to mention they are blowout proof and insanely adorable. Head to assemblybaby.com to learn more and use code BIRTHHOUR15 for 15% off your first order. That's assemblybaby.com, coupon code BIRTHHOUR15. At the end of this episode, I'll be talking to Liz from Assembly all about their diapering system. I'm so impressed with how easy they make it and how they provide all the products to make it really sustainable for you and your family. Today's birth story guest is Lisa, and she's going to be sharing 2 birth stories with us. I loved hearing her perspective because she's a family medicine doctor that does births as well, and she was really surprised by some of the things that maybe they didn't learn in medical school and that she experienced personally. Her first birth was a hospital birth, and then she decided to have a home birth with her second. All right, let's hear Lisa's story. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Hi, Bryn. Nice to talk to you.
Can you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. I'm Lisa. I live in rural Maine. I have 2 boys. They're 7 and 5, and I'm pregnant with my 3rd. And I'm a full spectrum family practice physician, which means I see everybody from birth to death. I deliver babies and take care of people in the hospital and a little bit of everything. My husband stays at home with our kids and runs our household and does all the huge gardening and all that stuff that goes along with that.
Fun. We kind of have similarly aged kids, it sounds like, with baby number 3 coming a little bit later.
Yep. Baby number 3 is a little bit later, but that'll be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back and start with your first pregnancy and how that went for you.
So I was a 2nd-year resident when we decided to start trying to have a baby. I, at that time, was working about like 80 or 90 hours a week in residency, but decided it would probably there's no great time to have a baby. So we just figured we had been married for a few years. So I started tracking my cycles and got pregnant probably about 2 or 3 months after we started trying, which I felt was pretty lucky. My pregnancy was pretty, routine. I didn't really have any complications. Since I was a resident, all my prenatal care was done by all my friends that I was working with, which was, I think, really special. And I got to just be seen when I was at work and really close relationships with my providers since we work so much together. And nothing really complicated in my pregnancy. And then I was due at the very end of December and was always worried about having a baby on Christmas. So I had a lot of anxiety about that. And then I was about 39 weeks right at Christmas time. And I was a little anxious about going into labor on Christmas. And so I think the day after Christmas, all that stress and concern about delivering on a holiday kind of lifted. And I woke up in labor the day after Christmas.
Our bodies work like that. It's like, okay, now we can have a baby.
Yeah, I think that relaxation and letting go of that really, I just woke up contracting. And I wasn't for sure, is this kind of the beginning of labor or not? I hadn't really had any prodromal contractions or signs of labor before then. So we kind of hung out at home for a while. We went on a little Target run to get some last minute things for our house. My husband wanted to go to Lowe's to get some paint. And so we went to Lowe's, and by then I was walking around having to hold on to the sides of the shopping cart and things like that at Lowe's. And I was like, oh, things are kind of progressing. And so we went home, and I labored for probably 4 or 5 hours at home. And of course, it's Maine, it's winter. We started to have a little bit of a snowstorm, and it looked like it was going to be getting more intense as the day was going on. So my husband was getting a little bit nervous about driving to the hospital in the snowstorm. So we packed our stuff up and went to the hospital. It's really odd, I think, sometimes to go and deliver where you work all the time. And at that time, I had delivered several patients and several people, but had never, of course, been in labor myself. So it was just kind of a totally different situation. But I felt pretty comfortable there since that's where I was working so much every day anyway. So got to the OB floor. I was set up with everything, and, they put me on the monitors. And at that point, I had kind of really wanted to try to not have any epidural or pain medication. But I didn't really do much prep for that, I think, during my pregnancy. And I wish I would have done more to prepare myself for that, because I was, things were a lot more intense than I had expected. My OB nurse was one of the nurses that had been there for a long time, and I felt really comfortable with her. And when I got there, I was very nervous that I was going to get checked and be 1 centimeter dilated, When we got there, she checked me, and I was about 4 centimeters. So I was pretty happy with that, because I've labored with all kinds of women, and it sometimes takes a long time to progress. So I was pretty happy that I was already 4 centimeters. My water broke not soon after I got there. After my water broke, the nurse came in probably an hour or so after I was there and checked me again. And she ended up placing a fetal scalp electrode on the baby without asking me or even explaining why. And I didn't really see any reason or indication to do that. So that's kind of something that I've always been bothered by. And I don't know if it's because I worked there and I was a resident, but that's one of the things in my labor that I think back at that I question why they would do that.
Did you ever ask after the fact?
No, I never asked. And I don't know if it was just because it's easier. I mean, I'm a little bit overweight, but I'm not I was being monitored pretty well by the external monitors. I wasn't ever on Pitocin. I wasn't, there was no real indication for that. Mm-hmm. I don't really know why that was done. Always been a question for me. I really didn't want those kind of interventions. And I felt like I couldn't say anything either because I work there and I couldn't say, hey, can you stop what you're doing? Which I wish I would have. So I'll kind of get into why. But so anyways, I continued to progress in labor. And I think I hit transition probably around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And by then I was pretty exhausted. I was getting contractions pretty much back to back. And my husband, as supportive as he was trying to be, was just not quite sure what to do. So I ended up getting an epidural, which ended up relaxing me a lot. I was able to get some rest. My husband almost passed out during it. He had to get some extra nurse support when I was getting my epidural, which I thought was kind of funny. I've never seen that kind of thing happen to him. And so I ended up getting the epidural and getting some rest, and then proceeded to complete on my own without any Pitocin. So I thought that was really, I was really happy about that. When I was getting ready to push, a couple of my resident friends came in. And so my room was filled with my friends who were also my providers. And that was just a great environment to be at. the main attending physician, is very sweet and who actually in the early ons in his career used to do like home births in Pennsylvania. So he was very supportive of lower interventions, and he really taught us a lot about how family practice physicians deliver a little bit different than OBGYN. So it was really nice to have him there. And about an hour into pushing, I ended up getting a fever, and the baby started getting a faster heartbeat. So they were a little bit worried that I had developed an infection. Thinking back, that's kind of why I was so bothered about getting a fetal scalp electrode without being asked, because my water had only been broken for like 6 hours. And I think it really increased my risk of getting an infection. And all interventions, regardless of who you are, should be explained to you by whoever's doing them before they're done. But I ended up pushing for about 3 hours and delivered without much complications. It was really pretty relaxed. When he was born, my son was born, we didn't know what gender he was. So my husband got to say what the gender was of the baby, and he was really excited about that and placed him right on my belly. And we did immediate skin to skin, which was great. Since I had a fever for about an hour and a half, they really kind of considered me having probably chorioamnitis. At the hospital I was at, I really didn't want my baby to start antibiotics right away, which is typically what they do if they feel like you have possible chorioamnitis, to watch for signs of infection. And so I really, really advocated to like not start antibiotics, and that we would stay at the hospital for 2 days. And really lucky that my attending was who they were and my provider was who they were. And I think at least I was able to really advocate that I did not really want that, since it was such a short time in my labor. And I didn't want the baby to have to be taken to the NICU for antibiotics. I wanted to be able to keep the baby in the regular nursery. I pushed really hard for that, and luckily was able to not have to at least have that intervention,
Yeah.
After the baby was born, the nurses just kind of left my husband and I alone in the room. And I had really little to no experience with breastfeeding or breastfeeding education. And I kind of knew very basic things at that time and, latched the baby right away. But it was pretty apparent to me that like his latch was not quite right. And I didn't really get lactation help or support for, that first day that we were there. And I think by then I had caused so much trauma to my nipple that breastfeeding was really painful for several weeks because of that. And I wish I would have pushed a little bit harder for some more breastfeeding support.
Did you end up finding anything that helped, or was it just powering through?
I was lucky that one of our pediatricians at our residency was a huge breastfeeding advocate, and she was very, very helpful. When I took him in for his 1 week checkup, she noticed that he had a pretty significant tongue tie, which she clipped in the office, which really, really helped quite a lot.
That's good.
And that was, I think, a huge thing. And I wish that would have been looked at a little bit more in the newborn nursery, or even like the lactation consultant that did see us in the hospital didn't really mention that, or during any of her evaluations when she did come to see me. But I think she only came to see me like one time before I left the hospital. So I was lucky to have our pediatrician be a big breastfeeding support. And so she helped a lot with changing positions and fixing the tongue tie and really evaluating his latch for a little bit better. And I did have some friends I worked with that were able to be a lot more helpful in supporting. But where I was in Maine, at least where I was living at that time, there wasn't a lot of other lactation support that I could reach out to. Eventually, I did find a mom's group that was able to be a lot more helpful with their breastfeeding support. I think given that trouble and the pain that I was having associated with nursing, I really kind of struggled with like the middle of the night, sleeplessness. I feel really glad that my husband didn't run out and get formula in the middle of the night, and that we were able to kind of get through the first couple of weeks of that pain and troubleshooting with breastfeeding, and with the support of our pediatrician, get to a good point where I felt really comfortable with nursing. I felt really blessed that we had a pediatrician that was so supportive with breastfeeding, because I know that's not always the case.
That's nice, especially since you weren't really finding the lactation consultant support.
No, I was really kind of sad that they didn't recognize like how bad his tongue, he had a really significant tongue tie, and how bad his latch was in the hospital. No one even talked to me about like my nipple trauma in the hospital, or ways to even make that feel better, or troubleshooting that. And I don't know if I was just left alone because I'm a provider, and, they assume that I knew what I was doing. But really, in our medical education, we're not taught anything about breastfeeding.
That's just so crazy to think about.
At that time, if a mom would have come to me and asked me for breastfeeding support or questions in the office, I wouldn't have had any education or any help to give them, which is really sad.
It's so crazy. It's like not teaching someone who's raising, cattle what to look out for with the mom feeding the baby. Like, it's just how you keep the baby alive.
I know. I think what we're taught is, if these people are nursing, great. And if it's, the baby's gaining weight, great. If they're not gaining weight, then you just need to put them on formula. I feel like that was like, up to that point, that's the education I had gotten.
Yeah.
Which is really very disappointing. But our breastfeeding journey got back on track, and we were able to continue to nurse. I went back to work, I think, about 4 to 6 weeks postpartum. And going back to work as a resident, I was going back between night shifts and day shifts, working still, again, about 80 hours a week. The residency was pretty supportive with making sure during office hours I at least had some pump breaks in there, which was really good. I think after my experience, really started getting more interested in learning about breastfeeding. The pediatricianist that had helped me out had started a whole breastfeeding curriculum for the residents to start learning, and making a rotation for us to actually follow the lactation consultants. And she was a really big advocate for us to start having more breastfeeding education in our program, which I think was great. I continued to nurse, and my postpartum time was pretty uncomplicated. I had a pretty routine, otherwise, postpartum care. I had a very supportive husband at home who took care of our son, Garrett, and that was great. I did end up having pretty severe back pain that started a couple months postpartum. I could never figure out what that was from, if it was from delivery or from pregnancy, but it was a pretty severe back pain, and I used to see my friends about it. And since I'm an osteopathic provider, I used to get manipulation and body work done as much as I wanted to, since I was working there, which was great. But I ended up getting a gallstone pancreatitis about 9 months postpartum, which I think was what all my back pain was from. Pregnant women sometimes can get gallstones a little bit more often. And I'm sure that that's what happened. It was my pregnancy gave me some gallstones. And so I ended up in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. Well, that kind of worked itself out, and pumping and trying to pump and get the nurses to store your breast milk when you're in the hospital for a different medical condition. That was a really hard thing to advocate for myself.
I wouldn't have even thought about that. That is interesting.
I didn't have my son there, and I was still nursing quite often because he was only 9 months old. And so I would make sure I was getting up and pumping every 2 to 3 hours. At that time, my son was still getting up pretty often at night. So I was making sure I was getting up and pumping. Even when I was not feeling very good, I was on I couldn't, I was NPO. I couldn't have any clear liquids for the first day or couple days. just IV fluids. So really trying to stay on top of that so that I didn't lose my milk supply was really important for me. And getting the nurses to make sure the nurses were taking my breast milk and storing my breast milk so my husband could pick it up at the end of the day was, that was a thing I had to really push for to be able to continue to breastfeeding, even, for a short stay in the hospital. So I really feel for women that end up in the hospital and trying to nurse and balance all of that is a really difficult thing.
Yeah, I had a dental surgery when my daughter was a few months old. And even that was like, it's just a lot to think about and juggle that people don't probably realize. And that was pretty minor, but.
Yeah. And that's not, I think that's something that in healthcare, if you have a woman that's nursing and they're in there for a medical condition, I don't think providers a lot of times even think about that or talk about how to support people through that. I hope people can really start pushing for a little bit of change there, because that's really sad to be in the hospital and then have to also possibly lose your milk supply or, decrease in that and put a big bump in your road of your breastfeeding journey.
Yeah.
I feel like I learned a lot on how to be a better provider.
Sounds like, good experience to be in the same shoes.
Yeah. So that's about my first pregnancy.
All right. Well, let's move on to your second then.
Okay. So I graduated residency and started practicing in pretty rural Maine. Like I said, doing full spectrum stuff. So I was delivering babies and working a lot. But about the second year into my practice, we decided that we'd start trying for a second child. My son was about a year and a half old when we started trying, and I got pregnant really quickly, like on the first try this time, which I feel so lucky that I was able to get pregnant so easily. My husband's family, his mother and all of his sisters have all had home births, and I actually, before I went to medical school, had thought about going into midwifery school if I hadn't gotten into medical school. So it's always something that was really interested to me. Of course, I watched The Business of Being Born when it first came out. And that was soon after I was out of college. And it was just always something that really was interesting to me. And I had a friend in residency who was one of my other co-residents who had a couple babies at home, and she used to just talk about how amazing her deliveries were. And my husband decided, he would be a lot more comfortable if we were not in the hospital setting this time. So we decided as a family that was probably the best thing for us to do this time, which was really exciting.
Yeah. So how did you go about finding the care provider for that?
Luckily, in our county in Maine, there's only 2 midwives. And the one I had worked with pretty closely on a couple hospital transfers. And so I'd gotten to know her very well already. And so I'd called her up and, said I'm pregnant. And we had a meeting with her and asked her if she would take us on. And that all worked out really well. She lives really rurally down this crazy dirt road, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So that was always fun trying to drive up to her property to go see her for prenatal visits. But, the prenatal visits with her were so much different and longer, and we got to actually really talk and get to know each other. And, she asked so many other questions about my life and how things were going, and not just about the pregnancy. And I really found that to be great. And I think let me bond with her a lot as a provider. I kind of hid that I was planning a home birth from my coworkers here.
I could see that.
I would kind of sneak my appointments with her and into my schedule. And I didn't really tell my office that I was like going somewhere else for my OB visits. Eventually, obviously, people could tell I was pregnant. And, then talking to the nurses on the OB floor and the other providers here, that was kind of interesting. No one ever said anything to me. Nobody ever told me I was being crazy or or anything like that, which I thought was really helpful. The physician's assistant I worked with in my office, who's kind of my office mate at the time, actually used to be a lay midwife earlier on in her life and used to deliver babies for some of the Amish community. So she was always very, very supportive. So that was really nice to have that support even in the office. But I was really nervous about what my coworkers were going to think about me or the medical providers, because I feel like it's not always supported by a lot of OB providers. I felt like I was a low risk. I lived really close to the hospital. I had a very educated midwife who was very supportive. So it was just a totally different way to manage my second pregnancy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What about symptoms versus your first? How did you feel?
I had a little bit more nausea at the early part of my pregnancy. I didn't really have any with my first at all. So I had a little bit more nausea with this pregnancy. It was a little bit more relaxed because I wasn't working near as much as I was as a resident. I ended up being due in February, which is another winter Maine baby, which is kind of a scary thing. And I think that's what kind of gave me the most anxiety, was like having to drive to midwife appointments in the snow. And sometimes there were like such snowstorms, I would drive like halfway there and be like, I can't make it the rest of the way because there's so much snow. And I think that year was a pretty snowy year. But I felt really good. I ate a lot better. I feel like she gave me a lot more education about nutrition and nutritional goals during my pregnancy. And she really educated me a lot on just trying to treat it like, take care of my whole self throughout my pregnancy, which I really don't feel like I got any of that with my first.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a holistic care model.
And you would think, as a provider who does OB care, like I would know all the things, but we're really not taught a lot about nutritional care in pregnancy, She also gave me a lot of books to be reading during pregnancy. Of course, like all the Ina May books. Birthing from Within was also one that I read. And so I felt a lot more prepared on how to manage pain in this labor and just trying to really prepare myself a lot better this time. I took a lot more time on myself, which was so helpful. And so, yeah, my pregnancy otherwise was pretty routine. I didn't have any other major complications. I did fail my 1-hour glucose test, but I luckily passed my 3-hour. I had done with her for her 1 hour. She does the, eating the different food categories and then testing your blood sugar after that to get your carb load. And I think I did it like 3 or 4 times because I was like, I kept getting really high numbers. And finally, I was like, I think I just need to take the glucose test. So that was kind of annoying, but that's okay. No one wants to take that 3-hour test.
Yeah.
But that was good. So I passed that and my pregnancy just kind of progressed normally.
Okay. So how did labor start for you this time?
So my due date came and went, and I had my schedule booked up until my due date. And I think that Monday was my first Monday I wasn't going to have to go back to work. And I woke up in labor. So again, I think that just like stress relief of like, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anything to do. I'm not stressed out that I have to like get all my work done. My work I had finished all that weekend. So I woke up in labor. And it felt so much like my first delivery as far as how labor started, and kind of my contractions just kept slowly building. That morning, we took a really great walk. It was the end of February in Maine. It was the first day that was really kind of nice and sunny and on the warmer side. So we took a really nice long walk, and that was really great. Kind of started getting things going. I probably labored for a couple hours before I decided to call my midwife as things were kind of picking up. So I called Cindy and I let her know that I felt like things were kind of progressing. It takes her probably about an hour to get to my house from where she lives. So she just said she would start getting her stuff ready and get there and get her assistant on ready and they would meet me at my house, which was great. So I decided that as things were progressing, I would get in the bathtub, and I had decided that I didn't really want to do a water birth. I think they look amazing and so comfortable and everything. I just didn't feel like that's what I wanted to do for some reason. But I filled up our bathtub and I was like, I can at least sit in our bathtub and labor in there. And I was in the bathtub for quite a while, which was great. And then decided that I was going to get out of the bathtub, and my husband had just left the bathroom, and I reached up on our soap dish on our tile wall to get out of the tub. And I proceeded to pull the whole wall of tile down onto myself in labor. The whole bath tile wall fell on top of me with all the grout and
oh my gosh,
broken tile and everything in the bathtub. And I was just like, just laid there until my husband could come and get me out. So that was kind of a little, I guess, comical relief in the middle of my labor. But then that meant the bathtub was out. I couldn't get back in it. It was just a total mess. But then by then my midwife had gotten there and she had a couple assistants with her. And they were very supportive. They helped me get in a bunch of different positions, and they had the rebozo, and they were helping me just make sure I was changing positions. I ended up getting a lot of my pain and contraction pain in my pubic bone area. I had no pain in my back, like no other contraction pain, but every time I had pain, I just had this horrible pubic bone pain, which I could not find any position to kind of relieve that pain. Unfortunately, I tried to get in the shower, but I do think looking back that probably doing a water, being in the tub or being in the water would have been the best thing I could have done. But I didn't expect to have where my pain was going to be. But things kind of continued to progress. And I was obviously like getting into some transition. I was feeling really nauseous, starting to feel really sick to my stomach. I was kind of feeling all those more intense contractions that you feel like when you're getting into transition. I hit that wall of like, I can't do this. I think we need to go to the hospital. And my midwife was so great and so supportive and calming, and decided she would check me because I hadn't been checked. I was 7 centimeters, and she said I had a big bulging bag of fluid. And I think that really reassured me that I was getting really close. And right after she checked me, probably in the next 2 contractions or something, my water broke. I was on my hands and knees, and she had a birthing stool behind me. And I immediately could feel him drop like way down into the birth canal. And I sat up and onto the birthing stool, and I said, this baby is coming out. I couldn't stop anything from happening, even if I tried to. And with one contraction, he just kind of came out on his own. I don't remember pushing at all.
Yeah.
You hear about the fetal ejection reflex, but then you experience it and it's just, I was in complete like shock. Like I didn't even know what just happened.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah. So she checked me and I was 7 centimeters to when he was born was about 10 or 15 minutes. It was amazing. He came out. We didn't know his gender either. And so my husband got to announce again what gender he was. I don't even think I remember looking because I was just in complete like shock of what just had happened. But he came out and she lifted him up and gave him to me, and I was sitting on the birthing stool. And it's just always amazing after you deliver how those contractions like just go away and everything just feels so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really amazing. And I'm like, just feel so happy to have experienced that part of labor that I didn't get to feel with my first at all and have really no pushing time. I think that was really special.
Yeah, it's another like cool thing to experience being a care provider and realizing that like the textbook,
No.
1 centimeter an hour or whatever is not the case for everyone, or most people.
Not
probably.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, also that sometimes you cannot stop your body from pushing. You hear these stories of women being told not to push because their provider's not there. And it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the things that drives me the most insane when I hear it in a story. I'm like, that's like telling someone to hold their like poop in when they're sitting on the toilet. Like it's just not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. At our hospital, since I work in a really small hospital, we don't deliver that many babies a year. Mm-hmm. And our nursing care is almost always 1-to-1. We hardly ever have more than one person there in labor at once. And our OB nurses definitely have delivered babies.
Yeah.
Because the providers haven't gotten there in time. And I don't think any of them would ever say, like, don't push. Mm-hmm. You got to wait for your provider. I think that's so cruel.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my friends who's a nurse was telling me that it's like really just more about the paperwork of it all. Yeah. She was like, all the nurses can catch. It's not a big deal, but it's like you have to do all this paperwork to explain why or something. I was like, that's crazy.
I'm sure it's all about the paperwork, the liability, which is just not something any woman should ever even care about. So that was pretty cool to have experienced that. And right after delivery, I felt so good. My midwife felt like I was bleeding a little bit more than she would like. My placenta also came right out. So the baby was delivered and my placenta came, I feel right out, within 3 or 4 minutes after delivery. And she said I was bleeding a little bit more than she'd like. So she did give me a shot of Pitocin in the leg, which was fine. It was just so nice to be able to climb into the bed and with the baby, and my 2-year-old had woken up at that point because he was sleeping, and he came in and got to meet the baby, and I just felt so great. And it was so nice to recover at home and be in that relaxed environment. I think that was probably my favorite part.
And how was breastfeeding this time?
So my midwife was also very supportive with breastfeeding, mm-hmm. and she got him to latch pretty soon after delivery. And he did not have any tongue or lip tie that we could see right off. And he was just a great nurser from the beginning. I never had any nipple pain. It never hurt. I can't, those first few weeks, I never had that pain. And it might have also been, I had nursed my other son until I was probably about 6 months pregnant. And then he kind of stopped nursing on his own when he was around 2 years old. So I don't know if that kind of helped too, but I felt so lucky that I realized oh, this is what an actual good latch is supposed to feel like, that it really shouldn't be that painful. And by then I also had done a lot more education on myself on breastfeeding and reading more about breastfeeding and proper latch and trying to educate myself a little bit more to be able to help myself and my patients. So breastfeeding went really, really well this time. I think he would probably still be breastfeeding if I hadn't weaned him. I weaned him about when he was 3 years old.
He was a big fan.
Oh yeah, he still would be. Yeah. I'm when he hit 3, I was okay, I was done. So I weaned him, and he had a really hard time with that. He's always a big fan of nursing. Yeah, which was really great for our relationship, I think. But sometimes you just hit a time where it's it's time for you. And so that was good. But I had a really routine postpartum care. I did have a lot more postpartum depression, mood changes with my second delivery. And I think it's just all about trying to balance 2 children and the sleep deprivation. And, that all kind of played a role into that. I had a very supportive work environment and some really supportive friends that helped a lot through that period of time. But I think that was pretty tough as far as the newborn period of time with my second pregnancy.
You think part of it was having a toddler too, or really just hormonal stuff?
I think both. I think the hormonal stuff, and I think trying to balance that toddler in there. I was really lucky that my first son he never really had kind of jealousy or that kind of attitude towards his brother. So that was great. After a few months, I feel like I kind of started to balance out. I went back to work about 3 months postpartum this time, which I think was really helpful in getting those extra few weeks in there. And having, of course, my husband super supportive when I went back to work. And when I was on call, getting called in the middle of the night, him having to like get up and get bottles and feed the baby and all that kind of stuff. You know, that was kind of a hard transition, but it all worked out.
Good. All right. Well, do you have any resources that you want to share?
Yeah. You know, with breastfeeding, of course, like Kelly Mom, which I think has been mentioned 100 times on your podcast. And your podcast, of course. I started listening to your podcast when I was pregnant with my second son and have continued to listen. And I just think it's so great to hear women's birthing stories. And as a provider, as an OB provider, I think a lot of us should be listening to women talking about their birth stories and learning from them and learning about how we can change things to do better. I think it's just really important. So I think it's a great resource. I also listened to Dr. Berlin's podcast. I really like that one. He's a pretty funny guy. I like his stories.
It's called Informed Pregnancy Podcast, right?
Yeah. Yep. And then the books I mentioned, like, you know, I read all the Ina May books. I found them very helpful. The Birthing from Within book. I did not do hypnobirthing with my first, but I'm kind of in the process of doing that with this pregnancy. So I'm finding that really interesting. And then just women, when they're having breastfeeding problems, you know, to seek help from your pediatrician, but also know that we are, you know, a lot of us aren't really super educated in that. So seeking like a lactation consultant or counselor is, I think, really important to add that additional help.
I've heard lately too about people getting support virtually. Like it's so awkward, like putting your boob on the Zoom camera, but I've heard really actually good experience.
Being able to troubleshoot on the phone or some support.
Yeah, someone to talk to.
You know, I think you just need that support. You know, there are some physicians that are doing more breastfeeding medicine. There's a great breastfeeding medicine podcast where they kind of talk about the journal articles and the research being done behind breastfeeding, which I find really interesting. But I think the majority of providers aren't super educated on it at all. So if you're not getting your support with your provider, always go and seek somebody else.
Yes, good advice. And or switch providers if you need.
Switch providers. Yeah. You know, you don't have to get along with your provider. You need to switch until you find somebody that you get along with.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Like not everyone gets along with each other. And so you need to find somebody that's going to support you in what your decisions are for you and your family.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. And where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
The only place I'm really on social media is on Instagram. My username is Stout Burger, Berger.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Lisa. It was so great to hear your stories.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryn, so much for everything that you do.
All right, now I'm going to chat with Liz from Assembly, today's sponsor. We're going to talk all about their cloth diapers and laundry and skincare products. Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for coming on the Birth Hour today to talk to me about Assembly cloth diapers.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling my listeners just a little bit about you and then your background with cloth diapering as well?
Gosh, it's actually quite extensive. I left my job in advertising in 2009 to launch a cloth diaper service in New York City. And my first baby was 4 weeks old at the time. And in hindsight, I have absolutely no idea what I was thinking. But being a born and raised New Yorker, I had a passion for my community and the environment, and the idea that I could be part of a business that served both was too good to be true. So I did it. And together, my partner and I created Diaperkind, and over the course of 12 years, we've serviced over 10,000 families, taught hundreds of Cloth Diapering 101 workshops, and washed literally millions of diapers. And from that experience, Assembly was born, along with another baby, but that's a totally different story.
I love stories like that. And I feel like they're not that uncommon in the baby industry. I think we have our babies and then we kind of get that passion to be involved in that line of work as well, helping other families.
Agreed.
Okay, so how did Assembly come about?
I mean, I'll be honest in telling you that creating a consumer goods brand certainly wasn't our plan from the beginning. We sort of stumbled into it. I mean, New York City is such a transient place, especially when it comes to people with young kids. So through Diaperkind, we found ourselves consulting with customers who were moving out of the city, and they were looking for advice on how to home launder on their own. And we were inspired because here we were with all of this knowledge in diaper design, laundry science, and the wants and needs of modern cloth diapering parents. And we just felt like we could use that expertise to create a complete system to make their transition from service to self super easy and actually even fun. So many new parents are overwhelmed and intimidated by cloth diapering, and laundry is most often their biggest hang-up. Mm-hmm. When we tell them that at Diaperkind, we wash approximately 20,000 diapers a week, if it were hard, we would have been long out of business. You just need the right tools and the right instruction and someone willing to offer assistance if you run into any issue. And that's exactly what we set out to do with Assembly. So all of our products, education, and support are right there for you. And I mean, even better is as we were preparing to launch Assembly and needed to raise money, we created a crowdfunding equity campaign and put the opportunity out there to our Diaperkind families. And many of them invested and are now partners in Assembly. So, which for us, it's just pure magic. I mean, these families who we delivered diapers to each week, they trusted us not only with their babies' bums, but with their money. And so that's the Assembly journey, using that Diaperkind foundation has just been wonderful.
That's very cool. A very cool connection to have there with your two different jobs you have going on. And like you said, I think that a lot of us want to use cloth diapers because disposables can be kind of a nightmare sometimes when everybody knows the term blowout if they have a newborn. But yeah, the laundering part of it can be really intimidating. And I have you guys' starter kit. Is that what we call it? Try it kit. Yeah. And like you said, you just make everything so easy. I mean, it even comes with a magnet with step-by-step instructions. But not only that, the products that you sell to use with them, like not only the laundry detergent, which is of course great, but the fact that the diaper balm or butt balm is cloth diaper friendly, which was something I kind of had to learn the hard way when I cloth diapered my first baby, is that you can ruin your diapers with some of these skincare products. So I love that you guys are kind of full stop with all your products. Can you talk a little bit about some of those other things besides just the diapers?
Yeah, I mean, that's you really hit it on the head. Like so many families are dissatisfied with disposables, whether it's because of the leaking and the blowouts or just the obscene waste or the cost of them. And new parents are shocked by how many diapers their babies go through, 70 to 80 per week. That is so much trash.
Yeah.
Assembly provides them relief from all of that. Our organic diapers are landfill-free, blowout-proof, and the system can save a family approximately $2,000 per baby over the cost of disposable diapers and wipes. And we want to ensure, like you mentioned, we have all these different products. We want to ensure that when a family is starting with Assembly, that we provide them with everything they're going to need for sustainable diapering from birth to potty training. So that includes organic diapers, organic wipes, all reusable and washable, organic cloth-friendly skincare that is guaranteed to completely, easily, and effectively wash out of the diapers so there's no excessive staining or buildup. We have upcycled storage bags that are made from recycled plastic bottles. And then laundry is our passion. So we make the laundering of diapers simple enough for any sleep-deprived parent to do. And it's as simple as 2 loads of laundry per week, which people are often shocked by. So we have a specially formulated washing powder that's, designed for diaper power cleaning, and our simple 4-step instructions, like you mentioned, that come on a magnet that you stick on the side of the washer. Yes. So disposables are marketed as the easy option, but we want to show people that radically reducing waste and using reusable diapers can be just as easy.
Definitely. And anyone who's emptied one of those diaper genies full of like the sausage of disposable diapers knows that that's not exactly easy either. Okay, so what's the most common thing that you hear from assembly families once they start using the system?
They are shocked at how simple it is. That's the most common thing we hear is like, wow, we were so worried. And this is actually really easy. We're so glad we did this. So, I mean, when new parents, expecting parents are in that planning nesting mode prior to having their baby, we stress over every decision. And then once they start using the assembly system and following straightforward instructions, they often feel a great sense of relief. We'll hear, wow, I thought this was going to be so big, but really it is actually as easy as 2 loads of laundry a week. And I think at the end of the day, the added benefits of no blowouts, earlier potty training, and saving money, those are just icing on the cake.
Definitely. And the diapers are really cute too. We haven't even talked about all the patterns and everything, but they're so cute.
Yes.
Okay. So what's your favorite thing about being in the cloth diaper business? I feel like you probably maybe answered this a little bit already, but anything else you want to add?
I mean, there's so many things about it. I am and always have been insanely passionate about the environment and reducing waste. But beyond that, I really love working with new and expecting parents. It's such a transformative time in life, and people are vulnerable and they're open to change. And there's I can speak for myself, but I know I was really trying to figure out how can I be a mom and take on all these new responsibilities, but also stay true to who I am. And so, I didn't want to compromise my values in terms of recycling and reusing, but everyone had me feeling like, oh, well, once you have a baby, all that stuff goes out the window because you're just mom, 24/7. And I just knew it didn't have to be that way. So I love working in this industry so that I can help parents, maintain their values while they're raising their baby and make it easy and make it effective for them.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so any tips that you might have for other new parents out there that have that entrepreneurial spirit that have helped you manage while having 2 young kiddos?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can say that having 2 businesses and 2 young kids is extremely challenging. And I'm like anyone else. On some days, I am like struggling to keep my head above water. I'm exhausted. I'm yelling at my kids and I don't get anything accomplished at work. And then on other days, I feel like I'm superhuman. And it's like, wow, I'm doing this. I'm working with talented designers on new prints. I'm diving deep into new research on sustainable materials, and I'm involving my kids in the process. Like, those days are magic, but they're sadly few and far between.
Yeah.
But I think for parents that are trying to figure out, how to navigate both, just seek out products that are both planet and parent friendly. In other words, the sustainable products that you choose should not just be better for the environment. They should be better than their disposable counterparts too. So like our diapers, they're landfill free, but they're also leak proof and less expensive. So the parents using them are getting both benefits. And I think that's really the way to make it work, because juggling, being a parent and doing anything else can be a challenge, and we need to go easy on ourselves.
I agree. And if it doesn't work, no matter how good it is for the planet, you're not going to use it. So you definitely have to find that happy medium. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I have one last question here that we didn't chat about before, but do you have a favorite diaper print right now?
Oh my gosh, we just released a new collection with designer Amanda Jane Jones, and her fruits print that she designed for us is by far my favorite.
I was looking at that too. That is really cute. I also love the little tigers that you guys have. So cute. Yes. And my son, he's almost 3, but we've used him a little bit. We use the shell for the pool as a swim diaper. Yes. Works amazing. And then we've used him at nap time. But he, when he saw the box is so cute too. He was like, I want that. That's for me. That's going to be mine. And I was like, okay, wait, I got to get some pictures first and be able to share it with my listeners. But yeah, I think it's very kid friendly too, because they're so fun for toddlers.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Liz, today. I was so excited to connect with you guys and to share Assembly with all of our listeners.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you so much again to Lisa for sharing her birth story with us, and to Assembly for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget, you can go to assemblybaby.com and use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR15 for 15% off. Assembly is spelled ESEMBLY and then baby.com. I'll link to that from today's show notes page, which you could find by heading over to thebirthhour.com and just searching for Lisa's name in the search bar. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.